Hello everybody, today we're going to talk about gymnastics wrist, okay? I get this term thrown around all the time. I get a lot of gymnasts coming into the clinic and they always complain about pain in their wrist on the dorsal side of their hand. And generally what happens is that they have this pain when they do a back handspring, any type of handstand, or any type of vault. Generally this is caused by like an uptick of vault, and it's just all that smashing into the hand that causes this wrist to actually become really sore. Now, usually what ends up happening is that they go see some type of doctor or some type of therapist, and the therapist says, look, you have gymnastics wrist. Well, I hate to burst your bubble. Gymnastics wrist is the worst term. It is a garbage bag term. Your therapist has no idea what's going on in your wrist when they say you have gymnastics wrist. Gymnastics wrist can mean a million different things. You have all these different muscles in your forearm that connect and go past your wrist and into your fingers. And there could be a million different reasons. And not to go into it for very long, but most of the reason is that you don't have a human wrist, okay? Oftentimes my gymnasts come in and I just say, let me see your range of motion in your wrist. And we've talked about this before. You either have passive range of motion or you have active range of motion. Remember, passive range of motion is something where I will take your range of motion passively into your full range. So this would be passive range of motion, right? I can usually take my gymnast's wrists and move them into extension or move them into flexion like this, and they usually have very good flexion and extension. However, when I ask them to do an active range of motion, can they control that end range? So I ask them to go from a neutral position, and I ask them to do complete flexion and a complete extension. Okay? Oftentimes, what I see is when they have gymnastics wrist, is that they have good flexion, because everybody has good flexion, that's about 90 degrees, but then they have crappy extension. Okay? So if they can only own this type of range of motion, well, of course they're gonna have gymnastics wrist. They're gonna have pain back here because they can't control that end range. What do you think is happening when you get into a handstand? You get into a handstand, you get into full range of motion, right? And you're gonna have to put all of your weight there. Well, if they can only actively control their wrist in this position, then they can't actively control their wrist in this position because they don't own this position to this position. And oftentimes what that manifests itself in is back pain into their back of their wrist. Basically, gymnastics wrist can be a multitude of things, but the first thing you probably need to check on your gymnast or your athlete who has wrist pain is, do they have full range of motion in their wrist? Do they have good passive range of motion? And do they have good active range of motion? And if they don't have good active range of motion, then you're gonna have to train them to get into active ranges of motion. All right, that's it. If you guys have any more questions, you can hit me up on Instagram, you can hit me up on Facebook and all of the social media stuff at The Sports Pod and at Dr. Blake Wu. Hope that helped. Talk to you guys later.